All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Pat Hurley. I'm the Vice President of Sales for the Americas here at Acronis. Thank you all for joining today. We've got a really exciting and thought-provoking, I think, webinar set up for everybody today. We appreciate you joining. The topic will be MSPs balancing rising cyber insurance costs with the growing security needs and the challenges, obviously, that everybody faces today. From my side, we'll be supported as well by a couple of all-stars on our team. We've got Hyla Strauss-Stanton and Collin Apodac joining us in a virtual room. If you want to go to the next slide, and we'll show their pretty faces here. Hyla works with our cloud sales team here in the United States. Collin is a solution engineer. He wears a few hats today. He'll also be running a demo, but also answering some technical questions in the chat. So feel free, pop into the chat, ask your questions. We'll be answering those live. Some of them we might even answer by the panel, but we'll be answering live over text in the chat. So if you have any questions, definitely put them in there. Any questions we don't get to today, we'll certainly follow up after the event as well. Moving forward, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce our agenda for today. First, we'll do my welcome speech. This is not about me. This is really about the topics we're going to discuss here. Talk about the root causes for cyber insurance. We'll demonstrate a live ransomware attack by Topher Tebow. We're going to then get into our panel discussion. We'll do a quick demo on our solution, how we attack these challenges head on. Live Q&A. Show you some resources, then we'll wrap up, send everybody on their way. The session will be recorded and available for replay, so if you're not busy this weekend, you can certainly go back and watch it again. Moving to the next slide, we will introduce today's moderator. He is well known in the MSP industry. His name is Dave Sobel. If you don't know him, get to know him. He owned and operated an IT solution service provider, an MSP, for over a decade. Both acquiring other organizations and eventually being acquired himself. You probably know him as well from the Business of Tech podcast, the owner of MSP Radio as well. He's a leading expert in this space with all things technology, broad experience in tech and business. And I think he still probably has a little bit of a tan remaining from the Acronis CyberFit session in Miami a couple of weeks ago. So Dave, I'll pass it over to you, and everyone enjoy the panel. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Pat. Great to be here. Still working a little bit of that tan. Let me introduce my panel here. I've got some real experts in the field, starting off with Joseph Brunsman, who's the founder of insurance brokerage Brunsman Advisory Group. He's a former IT pro with a bachelor's in robotics from the U.S. Naval Academy and a master's in cybersecurity law from the Carey School of Law. He's working on his 5th book on insurance, this one targeting MSPs. Good to have you, Joe. Jerry Koutavas is president of the ASCII Group, where he's managing the network of 1,300 MSPs in North America with tools and services to help them grow. Always great to see you again, Jerry. Jess Coburn is the founder and CEO of the Florida-based MSP Applied Innovations, began as a web hosting provider, and today is a managed cloud IT and cybersecurity services provider focused on SMB and healthcare, hospitality, and business services. Last but not least is Tyler Rasmussen. He is the VP of Cybersecurity for Executech, an MSP based in Utah. He owns both the internal and the client-facing security, and the team he manages delivers managed security services. Thanks all. So we're going to dive right in because this is a big, meaty topic, and we've got a ton to talk about. I want to start with this, the insurance landscape. And, I think, Joe, you're a great one to kick us off with this. Give us a little bit of a sense of what the landscape looks like right now.
Oh, so it is carnage, I would say is probably the best word for it, in both the cyber insurance side and the tech E&O side. So we're seeing, similarities between the two, just massive increases in premiums across the board. We're seeing large increases in deductibles or retentions. We're seeing companies bailing from the market entirely, companies that are refusing to even offer insurance to very specific industries. So it's an interesting time to be an insurance guy for sure.
I'm sure. Jared, I'll throw it to you because you talk to so many providers on this and work on insurance yourself for members. What are you hearing from the community there?
Yeah, it's the Wild West, and obviously it's very frustrating for MSPs right now because the question mark is, am I going to get covered or not? And many aren't, and it's unfortunate, but the insurance companies jumped into the space looking at the amount of money that could be made. And unfortunately, it's rearing its ugly head in terms of the risk now that they're seeing with all these cyber attacks taking place in small business. So it's not going to get better anytime soon.
So Jess, Tyler, each of you, are you struggling individually on the insurance front? What are you hearing from your providers?
David, we've seen our own insurance actually increase by 40% and our deductible increased by 5 times in this past year. And that was after going to market and looking at all the vendors out there. We had quotes that were 2 to 3 times more than what we paid last year. So it's pretty insane right now.
Yeah, we've had similar increases in premiums and additionally much more stringent requirements from the qualification from the insurance provider's standpoint in order to obtain insurance. So very interesting times, and working through that process is very important, but also it takes a lot of time and effort.
Okay, so Joe, is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? Like what do you think? What are you sort of projecting here in terms of rate increases? Is this going to flatten out? I mean, I would think these insurance companies, they're in the business of making money. They probably want to be in this space. How are they going to adjust?
Well, I will say broadly that I don't know of a single cyber insurance company that is actually generating a profit at this point. I think, right? So that's kind of like step one. Eventually, yes, the premiums are going to even out, right? But we could say for MSPs, as for cyber insurance in general, the premiums they've been paying, unfortunately, were just artificially depressed for a very long period of time. So now it's kind of a confluence of events that are making everything much more difficult for everybody involved. So specifically for MSPs, it's both the increase in the attack surface area, this big push to work from home, increase in obviously business email compromise, ransomware, et cetera, that kind of coming into play, colliding with just a hard market in general. So inflation, economic uncertainty, there's all of these issues that ultimately have to be resolved. So it's kind of like 100 moving parts at once, each one of which has to be taken care of before we're going to see insurance rates for MSPs or cyber insurance actually start to flatten out again. But it's probably going to be a painful couple of years.
All right, guys, from you guys out in the field that are talking this, like, let's talk a little bit of the cause then. I mean, I look at, I'm the analyst, right? I can sit back and look at this. And I know we've got really sophisticated players on one side, but I've got expert solution providers on the other, right? Who know what they're doing. I got world-class tools. What's the disconnect? Where's the root problem of this coming from? Jerry, you want to kick off with the members talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the frustration is basically small businesses not accepting the advice of the IT provider and really putting in the necessary security protocols so the risk is minimized. I mean, even there's a fight out there just for simple 2FA usage. So, where are we going to go from here? I mean, where I see is ultimately MSPs are going to be walking away from a lot of business unless these companies buy in to reducing the risk, or they just can't touch the client. I mean, it's that bad.
Guys, how are you managing that? Tyler, how are you managing that for your clients here? This disparity.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are actually taking, and I know of others that are taking this approach as well of coming up with specific recommendations for tooling that we are pushing out to our clients. And then if they refuse to implement or utilize those tools, then we are asking them to sign a recommendation refusal waiver to basically, do what we can to release ourselves of liability and help demonstrate to them, most importantly, that these things are serious and that it is such a huge problem. We, in addition to that, we've designed packages, security packages that are kind of a basic foundation for all of our clients that we are doing a strong push to market those, not so much from a sales standpoint. Of course, that's important, but also from just protecting our clients so that we can continue to do business with them. So those are some of the things that are going on right now.
So before I go, because I don't want to go too much into solutions, and I want to make sure we've discussed the problem. Just talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing, like from the regulatory perspective here in terms of the landscape. Like, how complex is it for the clients to manage this stuff?
So it's interesting, Dave. We're seeing that insurance applications now, before a customer, either us or one of our customers, would get an insurance application, its name, address, what do you do, a couple check boxes, and they're off. Now they have to fill out just this massive checklist of the different security pieces they put in place, and they have to select providers that they're using on there as well, and provide that information as well. We're seeing companies like Binary Edge, that was acquired by the Coalition, using that scanning. They're similar to Shodan, and they scan the network, they scan the internet, they use all that information. They're taking that information and they're making that part of the insurance process for these businesses, and potentially denying them because of what they see on the scan.
So that's coming out of the insurance agents themselves rather than the regulators?
So that's coming out of the insurance agencies, yeah. So we're seeing that. On the regulation side, it really hasn't changed so much, in my opinion. On the regulation side, it's gotten more stringent, which is naturally the case as things grow. But it's just that they're starting to hold businesses accountable to what they put on these applications and these assessments. And before, people were just checking check boxes. Do I have MFA? Oh yeah, sure, I have that. I use 2 passwords. And today, it's a completely different ballgame. They have to actually do these things.
All right, Joe, you're the expert then who works with the brokers. What are the brokers trying to understand on a problem perspective? Like, how are they quantifying all of this?
So I'll say, like, from the broker level, the broker/agent level, very little, if any, expertise in this area. Simply because the premiums are still so low that, that broker at the end of the day, he may get 5% of that premium, right? So something that's ultimately incredibly important for the company is really kind of an afterthought and just a paperwork drill for the average insurance broker. So unfortunately, it's really on the company to a large degree, in like 99% of circumstances, to actually work with their MSP to appropriately fill out the applications, understand what they're getting. I have a YouTube channel where I put out all this information for free, 500-page books, so forth and so on, to try and educate people. But, at the end of the day, I would caution the MSPs out there that don't put yourself in a position of trying to make your client look good to the cyber insurance companies. Right? Like, we all have that feeling of like, we want to help our clients, we want to make them look good. And I get it, but now we're actually starting to see, like Jess was saying, they're actually taking a real close look at this. So I would say for the MSPs out there, flip this on its head, right? Don't be afraid to say, hey, we can't answer XYZ question, or use that as a mechanism to actually increase the cybersecurity of your client, right? Because generally, if an insurance company is going to ask about it, there's got to be some level of importance there. And even from the cyber insurance techie, guy, I will say, yes, you need insurance, but that's after your defense in depth has failed, right? So long-term, you're doing your client a real service, truly, if they have better defense and they never have to use that insurance. Because once they use it, what we're seeing now is trying to get the follow-on policy. That's becoming incredibly difficult.
So, all right, we've got an audience here that is generally coming from the IT space. So, we've got expertise, that's very depth. But in order to understand the problem, Joe, help me a little bit understand, how did we get here? Because these companies, I always sort of quip, they're not stupid, right? They don't go into markets to lose money. So they clearly are in this market losing money. So they're going to adjust, but they didn't dive in completely without any thought of how this is going to go. How do we get here? Well, how did we get to this point?
Yeah. You are not yet as cynical about the insurance industry as I am. A lot of this is, frankly, the insurance industry saw, okay, here's the normal level of growth, right? Very traditional, kind of a zero-sum game. If you're going to get something, it's because you're taking it away from somebody else, or vice versa. And then the cyber insurance idea came into play, and it was kind of a combination of things. So it was insurance companies going, hey, we have to offer this, because if we don't, the other guy's going to get in here. He's going to offer it. That gives him a foothold. He's going to steal all the rest of our business. With that, you had a bunch of venture capital money just pouring in saying, hey, this is the next big thing. And so with that, that artificially deflated premiums, and there wasn't really any good actuarial data to support what these companies were doing or what they're charging. So for example, like, we as technologically minded people, right, we can say, hey, you know what, having antivirus on your computer is a really good idea. Right. But then to actuarially define, to put a number on how much safer that actually makes you, that's a very difficult task. Right. So generally, insurance companies want about 10 years of historical data to derive a premium. So for like car insurance, that's all publicly available data. You can get that. For cyber, it's really difficult to do that. And oftentimes, you don't even know what those numbers are until you've signed up a population set large enough to potentially figure out that you really just screwed your insurance company into paying out millions and millions of dollars. So, I mean, realistically, if we see cyber insurance premiums double in the next 3 years, a lot of these cyber insurance companies are probably still going to be losing a little bit of money, right? Like maybe that's like the break-even point. And so there's a long way to go, long way.
Gotcha. But Jerry, again, let's be a little simplistic here. Like we've been talking about kind of insurance needs and partnering on this front for a while, right? You've like ASCII's had some insurance benefits for a while, right? Isn't that is it the case? Is it the all caseload skyrocketing in terms of cyber? What are you seeing from the members?
I mean, it is happening. I wouldn't say it's skyrocketing, but it is happening because there's such a loose environment out there in terms of really trying to manage this. I mean, Joseph mentioned this, I think Jess did too, in terms of like, if you're going to be applying for a particular policy, you really have to put in a lot more information about the client, what's being used, and what have you. But even with that, nothing's really being validated as well. So, is it going to get better? Probably not. But the policies out there right now, we have a program still in place, and they're still writing policies. It's just a matter of providing the information and making sure that you're not misrepresenting anything. Like if the client doesn't have the security posture, they don't have it.
All right. So Jess, I'm going to throw you next on this. Is make it a little practical for me because like again, I'm the analyst who talks about this stuff, and I'll laugh and go like, but I've been talking about security for ages, right? Like I feel like, and I'm talking to two expert guys literally delivering security services. Make it real for me. Like, is it really that bad out there for end customers? Are the attacks that much more? What are you seeing from the field? Just kick us off.
So Dave, I was thinking about this, and it's treated like backup in that nobody really cares about their backup until they need it. And then it's, oh my God, how come I don't have this? What do you mean it won't restore? People don't, they don't think about testing their restores. They don't think about the 3-2-1 policy, all the things that Acronis has put out there. They don't think about that with backup. They don't think about it with cybersecurity or their cyber insurance. Almost every single company I walk into that is a new prospect, I ask them if they have cyber insurance, and their eyes glaze over like, hey, that sounds really interesting. Maybe I should get that. And so it's mind-boggling what's out there. So it doesn't surprise me that rates are going through the roof and that premiums are going through the roof, because I see firsthand, even in our industry, when we go into groups like Jerry's community and we see what's out there, people aren't taking the time to do it.
Tyler, what are customers? You directly are selling security services. What's happening on the front lines for your customers?
Yeah, great question. So we have been involved in quite a few, a lot of incident response cases in the past months and year and even weeks. We see we see these incidents continuing to increase. Ransomware, business email compromise, phishing, all of this. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, it's not uncommon that I see at least two a week incidents where customers that are not currently subscribing to explicit security services from us get compromised. And guess what? After that, they really want to subscribe to those security services. And it's just like Jess was saying, unfortunately, it's something that they don't pay attention to until it's a problem. And that's what happens with things that are cost centers. We're trying to get ahead of it by demonstrating the value of these things. And then on the insurance side, when we get these questionnaires, to Joe's point, what we do is, our security team will help them help the techs fill out those the responses. And we are very candid with, hey, look, this is not something we provide currently. You're welcome to have us provide that for you. And we want to provide that for you. We recommend this base security package that includes these things to everyone. However, that's not something you're doing right now. And so that's really helping actually with visibility and with awareness to kind of help customers understand that, look, they don't have some of these things that are basic security requirements that insurance companies and others are asking for.
All right. So go ahead, Jerry.
I want to put something in there too as well. Unfortunately, for us, we're also fighting a bit of what's being presented in the media, because ultimately anything that's being pushed out to educate the market about cyber incidents, it's typically mid-market and up, large enterprise and up. Nothing when it gets down to like less than 50 seats. But there's, thousands, tens of thousands of stories out there. So it's unfortunate that it's not getting into the ears of the small business owner where they see that they're a target. And that's something that we have to figure out how to compete with, because there is stories out there. So if Tyler has an incident with one of his clients, somehow, some way, you got to leverage that, put it into a story, package it up, and share it with the other prospects to try to drive home the point that you are a target. It doesn't, don't worry about the breaches of target or what have you. Ultimately, it's going to hit you as a small business.
It's interesting you bring that up, Jerry, because I was literally just working on some data for today's pod, talking about the ratio, they call it the ratio, ransom per annual revenue ratio, that a new research group is looking at to determine who's paying out the most. And they're actually finding that smaller companies pay more in ransom per annual revenue. So it is a disproportionately large amount as a proportion of their size of business, even though the absolute amount is smaller. Now, in order to make sure that I'm not oversimplifying this in my head, because I suspect there's audience members that are doing what I'm doing, Joe, help me understand the problem just a little bit more to make sure that I'm not talking too broadly about insurance. What's the sort of difference between E&O and cyber and my general liability? Like, do I need to be a little bit more clear in separating these?
Yes. So, when the average person looks at insurance, I understand, right? Because I came out of the Navy. You look at insurance and it's just this overwhelming series of choices and policies, or, sometimes hundreds of pages long if you have a master policy and trying to unwind all this stuff. I do have videos on all this on my YouTube channel. It's all out there for free. I don't make any money off that stuff. I just want to help the community. But I would just say this. So there's a big difference between a cyber policy and a tech E&O policy, right? So the easiest way to think about that is cyber insurance. That typically would come into play, right? Like, let's say a lawsuit happens, right? That's because you lost someone's PII, PHI, PCI. Like, there's a class action claim. MSPs should not have cyber insurance. What they actually need is something called tech E&O insurance. Tech E&O insurance is two parts squished together, right? So if you have a cyber policy and an E&O policy, you're probably going to get burned. And I have a whole video on that. It's like 10 minutes long. I'll save the explanation here. But what you need, the tech E&O, two parts, right? Tech E&O means somebody suing you for damages for the professional services you rendered, right? So MSPs are generally not construed as data owners. They may just be data holders, just like Azure or AWS is a data holder under the eyes of the law. And so they're going to get sued for, hey, you failed to properly, install this firewall, or you screwed up X, Y, and Z, right? That's where those claims are going to come from. That's the E&O side of tech E&O. And then the cyber side of tech E&O is effectively like a cyber policy with all those first party coverages on there. And then, outside of that, there's like a million different insurance policies you can buy. Generally, it's going to be most MSPs, right? Being smaller businesses, business owners policy or commercial general liability. Watch the video if you want to understand the differences between that. Employment practices if you have employees. What else did you have? Hired auto, like the general line stuff, which I don't typically deal with. But does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. So, all right, I think we've got a good sense of where the problem is here. But we're out of time on defining that, so I think we've done a good job with that. So, Pat, I'm going to hand things back over to you to give a little bit of a of look into what's next and illustrate the point on ransomware.
Yeah, absolutely. Very educational stuff, guys. A lot of information. I'm not ashamed to say I just did not know. So this has been very educational for me. But yeah, we'll shift gears slightly. All the stuff they've been talking about insuring against, we're going to show you what that actually looks like if you're unfortunately the victim of a ransomware attack. So I'm going to pass it over to Topher Tebow. He is our senior cybersecurity researcher. If you're looking for him, he's going to be glued to a seat probably in the U.S. Cyber Protection Operations Center here at Acronis. So Topher, over to you.
Thank you, Pat. So basically, what I'm going to go over today is an actual ransomware attack. This particular ransomware is Conti, which we've seen a lot in the news over the last few months. It's been a big heavy hitter this year, especially as some of the more well-known ones were taken down earlier in the year. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at this ransomware. So in this demo, what I have going on is a few different windows to kind of help keep track of exactly what's going on during the ransom attack. This upper left one, I've got process monitor to see what is happening with the registry keys on the system. Below that, I have process explorer, so we can see the processes that are running throughout the attack. You can see we've got explorer and a few other things going here. Of course, we have some files to be ransomed and our trusty ransomware email that looks like it's from a trusted tax service. Now, you look through this, it looks pretty legit, very much like what you would see coming from TurboTax. But when we click this view order details, what we get is an order confirmation in Word. It's a little weird. A lot of times you'd see it just in a website or maybe a PDF, and this attack could come from a PDF too. So we open the Word document, we see that Word is opening, but right there we just saw Conti show up under the winword.exe process. That's a little unusual, not really something that Word would do. Now we're looking through, just watching what's happening here, and we can see the file extensions changed on most of our files, and suddenly there's this weird readme.txt file. This extension has been appended to most of our files. We try to open it. Nothing's really happening there, so let's try to change the file extension back to an Excel file extension, and we'll try to open this. Now at this point, the system's running a little bit slower because Conti is encrypting all the files. So while it's taking some time to open, let's also take a look at the readme.txt file and see what that's all about. This opens up, again, takes a moment, and we can see this is our ransomware note. No more flashy web pages or desktop backgrounds with scary GIFs or images on them. It's just a basic text file that gives you some information about what happened and where you can go to pay the ransom should you choose to do so. Now, obviously, that's something we all want to avoid. And here we see the Excel file finally opened, but nothing has actually loaded within it. That's because it's not actually a true Excel file, and we can see that from this warning that just popped up. This is basically saying that it doesn't actually match between the file type and the extension on the file. So let's take a look at what happens on a protected system now. For this same setup, we have, Process Explorer, Process Monitor, still have some files to be ransomed, and they're, the exact same set of files here. And then of course we've got our TurboTax malicious email. Go into the view order details. Process is exactly the same at this point. You download this WinWord document again. It opens up in the Process Explorer just like before. Things are basically running just about the same. Word starts up. We even see Conti start up here. Now, just because the system's protected doesn't mean that the files that are downloaded by malware will not start. But what we do see here is Conti disappeared and then the document opened. That's because the process was stopped as soon as it was determined to be malicious. There were some background processes that reverted any changes that were made by the malware. Now we can take a look at the CyberProtect console here, and we see suspicious activity was detected. We've got some basic information about what happened. We see the device, the running process, why it was being monitored, why it was suspicious, and of course the action taken to reverse using the cache, as well as all the files that were changed back. Now let's take a look at what happens if you just block the attack right from the start in the first place. We've got URL filtering enabled on this particular machine. So when we go into the malicious link, instead of downloading the file, all that happens is that the URL ends up being blocked. You don't even get the malicious file on your computer in the first place. So yeah, basically with that, you can see, a ransomware attack, it can happen very quickly. It's very easy to fall for a lot of the lures, especially, for instance, if that had happened during tax time, one of your users may have been expecting an email from TurboTax or, some other tax service. So it's really easy for people to fall for these sorts of attacks and essentially accidentally run ransomware on their systems. Which is why it's so important to have proper protections in place. And, even, again, going back to the insurance conversation, having, proper cyber insurance in place, because you never know what attack vector is going to be used, how this thing is going to get into your systems, and what kind of havoc it's going to wreak. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this back on over to Pat.
Thank you, Topher. Very interesting stuff. Obviously, our attendees are much more happy to see that in a simulation than in their screen live. So thank you for showing that demonstration. We're going to kick back to the panel. We got a second panel discussion here. We're going to throw a little bit more heat into the kitchen by adding James Slavey. He's the Director of Cyber Protection at Acronis, product marketing veteran, been working in cybersecurity and networking for decades. Been in the industry covering cybersecurity, cloud, networking for research companies like Forrester and others. Dave is going to lead this panel session again. So Dave, back to you, bud.
Awesome. Well, I want to take it. We've got an audience question, guys, that is coming out of our last section that I want to throw to the group. Are you seeing companies not getting covered for cyber insurance that's impacting their general business insurance deductibles and premiums, and even their ability to insure the whole company? Joe, you probably got a great industry view on that. Are you seeing that?
Yes, it would be incredibly rare for a cyber insurance policy to reimburse a company for their general business insurance deductible or premium. Moreover, what you have to actually be concerned about is something that he probably doesn't even know exists. And to get nerdy for a sec, there's something called a mutually repugnant other insurance clause. Right. So in all of these policies, they have a little clause that says if something's covered under this policy that's covered somewhere else, it's the other guy's problem. And so logically, what would happen, right? You would end up in this infinite loop of each insurance company pointing their finger at the other guy, and then the consumers in the middle just wondering what happened. So typically, like, you actually do not want any overlapping coverage in the cyber area. Sometimes I don't want to delve too deep into it because it would get too specific for this conversation, but generally you want to try and avoid that. So there really shouldn't be a situation where a cyber policy is going to reimburse a general business insurance deductible.
Gotcha. Jerry, you're from members, we're not hearing issues with their general policies right now or for their customers, right? It's all the cyber specifically.
It's pretty much cyber. We haven't run into that particular situation. I think it's probably pretty rare, but it's mainly just on the normal policies and getting coverage. So that's the biggest issue we're seeing right now.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we can sort of engage, how we can maybe make this a little bit better. And guys, I'm going to start again with you from the field. Sort of, Tyler, kick me off on saying, like, how do you get clients involved in supporting these efforts? Because it would feel like, I mean, it's in their best interest, right? Keep their rates down, get involved with that kind of stuff. How are you going about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really about explaining the value proposition and being able to clearly communicate that, right? I mean, so much in good security and business in general is just about being able to clearly communicate what's important. And so we do that through, we have, education outreach campaigns to our clients. And then again, they do often get these insurance questionnaires, and then our security team will get on with them and help explain why these things that they're being asked about are important. And unfortunately, one of the biggest drivers for this, again, is just real incidents that occur. And then once the real incidents occur, they're all ears. And so that's, I think I mentioned before, we're averaging probably about two business email compromises per week, or phishing attacks per week that we're helping clients respond to. And then, in many cases, we had one last month where I think it was last month or the month before, where they lost over $200,000. One recently where they just lost about 150 grand. And so it's really unfortunate, these things that are happening, but that's really where the rubber's meeting the road, is when they see the consequences. And again, we're trying to get ahead of that. We're trying to be very active about that, because that's not good for them. It's not good for us. We have to spend more resources and time responding to it. But that's kind of the reality of the situation that we're seeing right now.
Jess, what's happening with your customers there? How are you helping here?
So I think Tyler nailed it, Dave. It's educating the customer. It's showing them that their employees are vulnerable. It's performing a fake phish, having a conversation of, when have you heard about someone with gift cards, or have you received this strange email from your boss that really wasn't from your boss? And 9 times out of 10, when we start to have that conversation, oh yeah, that happened to us a few months ago. It was really bad. And then it's, well, what did you do about that? Absolutely nothing.
Joe, how's the sort of cyber insurance impacting sales? Like, how do the two go hand in hand?
I love this question. So one of the videos I put out on my channel deals with the limits of cyber insurance. So remember, my side of the equation has done an absolutely atrocious job of explaining what cyber insurance can do and what it can't do, right? So something as simple as, let's say you're talking to a client about backups, right? Well, that's when you have to know that there's the OFAC sanctions list, and you have to explain to them, hey, if you get hit with a specific strain of malware, we have no idea what that is, right? Like, you can't control that, obviously. It may be illegal to pay that ransom, in which case you're going to have to go to backups. And if you don't have the appropriate backups, suffice to say, if this happened to some Fortune 500 company, yeah, Department of the Treasury is going to give them the exemption. If it happens to your business, you don't have a lobbying group on Capitol Hill, so the odds are pretty much zero. Likewise, if you're dealing with companies that transfer large amounts of money, increasingly the cybercrime, social engineering type coverages are just getting more and more sublimited, right? So at that point, it's very easy just to say, okay, how much money are you transferring every week, right? Or every day or every month? And if it's over, say, 100 grand or maybe 250 grand, if they're lucky, if they have a legacy policy, then you're saying, all right, well, somebody could be tired and you could lose $500,000, right? So suddenly the investment in cybersecurity tends to make a lot more sense once you understand the limitations of the cyber policy, because I think businesses rely too heavily on that policy without really understanding what it can do, what it can't do, and being overly reliant on the assertions made by some insurance guy who's, maybe been doing this for a week.
Gotcha. So it would feel like there's a lot of risk here in the supply side of this too. Jerry, how are you and the community talking about this and looking to address that?
So it's a good question. We came up with a security committee made up of roughly 13 MSPs across the country, and we started digging at what can we actually do to help lift sort of the community up. So the first bit of guidance that we pushed out was a set of questions that MSPs should be asking their vendor partners. And so it was very thorough. I think we have probably about 2,000 downloads on it right now, and it's a start. Probably a good percentage of the vendor community is reaching for these goals in terms of answering the questions that were presented in this guide. But things like that only can help. The other thing that we're pushing out right now is questions that you should ask in terms of vetting an MSP, in terms of making sure that you're getting a quality MSP. Because unfortunately in our industry, because technology has gotten so easy in terms of using it, a lot of people are jumping into the space and really shouldn't be in it. So you got this sort of merry-go-round of like, hey, let's work with somebody great. No, I'm going to go on price, and they get popped, and then it just keeps going around and around and around. So, but yeah, we're trying to tackle what we can based on that committee.
Just you're nodding a lot there. Because how are you working with on the supply side of things?
Well, I was nodding, Dave, because it always comes down to cost. And whenever you're having this conversation, it's about cost, whether it's internal or with the customer or external to the customer, it's about cost. And the conversation really needs to elevate above that. So that's why I was nodding.
Gotcha. So, but how do you address that? Are you pivoting that into a value conversation with customers, a risk mitigation? How do you pivot it away from the cost conversation?
So for us, it goes back to what Tyler mentioned: is educating the customer and showing them. It's showing them the attacks that are coming in. It's showing them that, hey, someone logged into the accounting mailbox from Nigeria at 3 o'clock yesterday morning. Did you guys go to Nigeria by any chance? And it's opening their eyes that way. So again, one of my favorite tools is the fake fish. You fake fish a company, and you're bound to get probably 30% of the employees to click the link.
So Tyler, I'm gonna ask then as a bit of a follow-up, like and we always talk about education, and look, I'm a media guy, right? So I'm constantly putting out stories. Today's is the cheese prices are plummeting because of cyber attacks. I could have done gas pieces. Of course, there's U.S. government breaches. How much is education necessary here for customers? Is it that we're not making it specific enough? How are you talking to customers to make it relevant?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that we do is we present to them, hey, here are the greatest risks your organizations are facing per actual hard data produced by the Verizon's Data Breach Investigations report. And based on that, here's the things that, potential solutions that can help to mitigate these threats. And then we tell the war stories, right? We tell the war stories about what's happened, and then that usually helps open their eyes a little bit and help them understand the reality of the situation. And then in addition to that, we talked about, Jess talked about phishing campaigns. Now, we don't take the approach of running a phishing campaign without someone's consent. However, if we can get them to agree to that, and we have so many clients that are just approaching us now asking for that, whether it's because of an insurance requirement or they just hear about it and are worried about it. Usually when we can do that, and we have a great success rate, of about 30%, like was mentioned, to get users to click, and then they can quickly see, hey, we really are vulnerable to this. And it kind of helps push that agenda along. So,
Joe, and you've seen some interesting stuff around this, haven't you?
Yeah. So in terms of supply chain risk, probably the biggest pointer that I would give to the MSP community from my side of the aisle is, we as technical people have a big blind spot, right? And that blind spot is we go, okay, what happened? And then we start going through the checklist, right? Like that's why we do what we do, because we're technical people and we think in a generally a very linear fashion. So we have this idea of, hey, if it wasn't my fault, it's not my problem. And that's just simply not true. So you have to understand the whole reason people are hiring you guys is because they don't want to understand ultimately like any of this stuff, really, right? What do they want? They want their computers to work, the applications to work, and hopefully the printer works most of the time, right? And so, in terms of self-preservation for the MSP, obviously one, have the right tech E&O insurance in case they come after you. And two, contractually require your clients to carry cyber insurance. And the reason I say that is because if some vendor gets breached, right, and that leads to a supply chain attack on your client, they're not going to know necessarily who those guys are. They're not going to care who they are, right? First in the firing line is going to be the MSP. And what you guys do is so technical, right? And it's so complex, you are not going to win a court case. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, a jury is not going to understand what you're talking about. So at the very least, there's going to be a six-figure settlement in many cases, right? So protect yourself as much as possible.
Yeah, this is something I can chime in on a little bit. I don't think any of us were thinking about tech supply chain attacks a year ago, but we've seen a series of vendors of tools that we all rely on that have been compromised. And that's, of course, terrifying. You're supposed to be your client's trusted advisor and securing their technology, and you turn out to be the conduit for malware into their environment. So some prophylaxis is a good idea here. One of the pieces that we're going to point you to at the end of the show is a white paper that I wrote that MSPs can use to kind of put together a little framework for themselves for assessing their software suppliers and to make sure that they're doing the right things to protect their development environment and their environment in general. And if your clients are smart, they'll be doing the same thing to you. But we at least wanted to put together a starting point for our MSP partners to try to be able to assess the risk of the tools that they're using. Because if you can reduce that, then hopefully you won't get to the point where you're dealing with the insurance issue in the first place.
So that's a lot of people and process kind of stuff versus technology. How much, particularly for those of you guys that are either on the field or working with partners, how much of this work and what approaches around people and process are you leveraging from a consulting perspective, from a service offering? How are you addressing that? Jess, you want to jump in there, or Tyler?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I would say that just in general, there's not enough people and process in place in the efforts to, I guess blue team efforts, or the efforts to put appropriate security measures in place. Now, there's the idea that tools can solve, the problem, and tools are absolutely necessary. There's no question about that. But having the appropriate security professionals, and then those security professionals understanding the environment and creating the appropriate processes to put in place to utilize those tools, and then understand using those security professionals to understand what's coming out of those security tools and interpret it and take the appropriate action. Those things are just, I can't underscore the importance of those enough, of those things enough. And it's unfortunate that MSPs in general have, in my opinion, very much underinvested in people and process in that regard from a security perspective. I think it's starting to catch up just based on necessity. And that's, again, that goes back to our conversation of, you don't worry so much about backups until you actually need them, right? So you don't worry about security until you, and people and process until something's wrong. So it's just something to be conscious and aware of.
Jess, is that built into your offering? Like, how are you addressing people in process?
It is. So a big part of what we do internally is that we'll do like role playing. We'll say, hey, this customer just got hacked. What are we going to do? This customer's email just got compromised. How are we going to go about that? And it's getting the team to go through that process to make sure that we're prepared and that they know what to do. It's one thing to have a checklist and a process put in a file cabinet. It's another thing to know where it is and how to execute against it. And that's really important, both for us and for our customers.
Gotcha. So and this is an interesting one. Are you guys here? This one from the audience. Are you guys requiring cyber insurance for your clients moving forward? Like, is it an absolute? Is it an optional? Are you rewriting your agreements? Are you guys requiring insurance going forward?
So nearly all of my clients are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would think so. Jess?
So it's the first conversation we had with any prospect that comes in, is that we want to make sure that they're there and they're moving in that direction. For some of these businesses, it's not that expensive for them to get some coverage, at least today. For
Right.
us, story. But yeah, to answer your question, the response is yes, absolutely. We want them to have that and to be protected by it.
Tyler, how about your customers?
Same thing. So we advise them to one, look into and look at their opportunities and options for cyber insurance, and strongly encourage them to get a policy and then help them through that process. At this time, we're not requiring it of customers. It comes down to a cost benefit analysis and trying to help everyone understand what benefits there are to that. Because just frankly, candidly, if you start to require that, you're going to lose a lot of a certain percentage of your clients, and you'll potentially lose new business. So it comes down to a cost benefit analysis. Those are the hard realities.
Yeah, Jerry, how much across the community? And I know you want to add something here.
Yeah, so what we're seeing right now is that MSPs are including new clauses into their contracts, almost assuming that their client potentially could get breached, where if you do get breached, this is the number of hours that we're going to look at using at a minimum in terms of resolving it. So little things like this are being added into contracts now, and it's something that's necessary.
Gotcha. So Joe, can MSPs work with the providers to address the costs, or the ways that they can tweak the policy to help manage it?
So you're asking, like, can the MSP work with the cyber insurance provider to start tweaking?
Right. Yeah.
Generally, that's an area I say, like, you don't really want to get into, right?
Okay.
For the same reason that, like, I don't sell backup solutions. You probably look at me sideways. You're like, yeah, what are you doing? Unfortunately, the cyber insurance market is really the Wild West, right? And so every policy I've read probably well over 200 different policies and endorsements and attachments from all the different various cyber insurance companies. They're all different. And so, I did have a video on my channel where an MSP could just send that out to their client to help them understand what cyber insurance is in like 10 minutes. But it's not really an area where I think that MSPs should be jumping into negotiating insurance, because that's a legal contract. And so it's a tough spot, right? Because, like, my industry is not known for, really appealing to Mensa members, right? We don't have a lot of those in the insurance community. And so you kind of just have to, one, I would say, contractually require it. And then that's got to be pushed off to hopefully the relevant subject matter expert to assist your client with that. Now,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So a little bit of warning, don't get involved with the legal side of this. Well, guys, I know we can keep going for a lot of time here, but I want to make sure we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A here at the end. So start getting those questions in. But Pat, I'm going to throw it to you because we've got a little bit more before we get to those Q&As.
Yeah, great panel so far, guys. And thanks for sticking around for some additional Q&A live from our attendees here. I'm going to pass it to Collin Apodac now. He's going to show you guys a little bit of a peek behind the scenes of the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud platform, which our MSPs use to deliver cyber protection services to all their clients. Collin, over to you, boss.
I had some microphone issues. Thank you, Pat. I really appreciate that. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a quick stroll through the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud and show you how our solution can check some of the boxes that we were discussing in the panel today. So without further ado, let's dive into the dashboard. The overview dashboard provides you and your team with an up-to-date view of key performance indicators for all of your assets that are being protected by the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, which can be customized by selecting from our comprehensive selection of prepackaged widgets, which provides your team with key insights and a visual representation of your cyber protection status. It's becoming increasingly difficult to remain in the know on emerging threats. Our integrated threat feed displays threats that are relevant for your IT environment, which is populated by our Cyber Protection Operations Center. This also includes things like weather events or other natural disasters that may impact your organization. From there, we provide you with recommended actions that can be executed with a single click, providing you with auto remediation with minimal effort. Agent installation is a breeze with our intuitive machine discovery feature, which allows you to install a single agent in your environment and utilize its access to quickly deploy agents to all of your supported IT assets, and immediately apply a protection plan to keep your users' data safe and secure. Want to deploy via a GPO? Not a problem. We provide you with documentation that shows you how to quickly and effectively deploy our agents via Active Directory or the package manager of your choosing, providing you with immediate cyber protection. We're constantly evolving our cyber protection platform to address the ever-changing needs of our customers. We do this by delivering every function and feature through a unified platform that leverages a single agent and a protection plan that encompasses all of your environment's needs. One of these features is our continuous data protection, which protects application metadata or files and folders in between scheduled backups. The days of the CEO losing his critical spreadsheet are long gone, leading to increased operational efficiency and limiting potential downtime due to data loss. No backup and security strategy is complete without encryption. By enabling this option, we give you the ability to set a zero trust password that will be encrypted with either AES 256, 192, or 128, keeping your archives and your data safe and secure from potential bad actors. Is your organization bound by strict compliance standards by a governing body? If so, we provide you with the ability to capture forensic backups, which will include a whole disk capture comprised of both used and unallocated disk space, as well as a raw memory dump and a snapshot of running processes, which can then be imported into any off-the-shelf forensic auditing tool for analysis. We can all agree that forensic backups are good for analysis after an event, but what can we do about proactive protection? With the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, we provide you with intuitive URL filtering based on categories that includes automatic blocking of known malware sites by leveraging data collected by our Cyber Protection Operations Center. If malware still finds its way into your environment, we provide you with best-in-breed zero-day ransomware protection through our innovative AI ML-based active protection. That, coupled with our industry-leading AV and anti-malware, and you have an airtight cyber protection platform that will lead to less emergencies at 2 a.m. and more restful nights. Everyone has heard of horror stories pertaining to users picking up random flash drives and plugging them into their home or corporate issued machine, only to find out it was infected with some form of malware, leading to a compromised machine. With device control, you can shut these ports down or whitelist specific drives to easily control what hardware is being attached to your corporate assets. Want to know what third-party software is hogging resources on a user's machine? With software and hardware inventory built in, you can get a picture of what software users are installing on their machines or identify what users may need a hardware refresh. We all wish everything can be done through automation, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we need to access a user's machine to triage and remediate the issue. We have you covered here as well by providing a cyber protection desktop, which creates a secure tunnel to the machine, allowing you quick remote access. Vulnerability scanning and patch management quickly identifies missing patches or vulnerabilities that exist in your environment through regular scans. Once complete, our single agent solution allows you to patch these vulnerabilities. More importantly, our integrated cyber protection platform grants you the ability to perform a pre-update backup, which allows for quick rollback to the most recent point in time in the event of a blue screen of death, corrupt installation, or potential boot loops. Does your DR documentation have the same page count as the Encyclopedia Britannica? You're not alone. We've all been there. Our disaster recovery platform provides you with enterprise features at small business costs with zero heavy lifting. Run a backup to our cloud, assign some CPU and RAM, and you're ready to fail over a machine. It's that simple. Dreading dusting off that novel-esque disaster recovery SOP? No need. Our runbooks can be used to automate your entire failover strategy, removing complex procedures and human error from the equation. This leads to predictable outcomes and a little less stress when dealing with a down event.
Excellent. Thank you, Collin. Very informative. I know that's just a peek at all the capabilities of Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, but thank you for the quick demo there. I know the audience probably enjoyed it. We're going to go back to the panel, and we got some great minds here, and we got some interesting questions as well from our audience. So I'm going to pass it back to Dave. We're going to answer some of those live. We're going to pick some winners here, right? We can't get to all of them, but there have been a lot of really good questions here.
Yeah, we'll try and get to a couple of these. Guys, I want to take out the crystal ball here for a second. Anyone see the insurance industry having a ratings benchmark, such as what we've heard out of Moody's, looking at credit ratings based on the organization's sort of cybersecurity preparedness as a way of looking at this? Any predictions on that one? That's from our audience here.
So I will, I'll jump on this one. I have not seen anything of that specificity yet. So could we ultimately get there? Sure. It's going to be a while until we see something that specific. Like honestly, they're still trying to figure out, hey, if you enable MFA for email access, how much safer does that make you? Right. So like trying to drill down to that level of specificity, like really is going to be a difficult task.
Gotcha. Okay. So I've got another good one from the audience here, particularly asking our MSPs, are you guys requiring your clients to purchase monoline security policies, or are you accepting coverages provided under the sublimits of some of the commercial package policies? It's a real good targeted one. Jess, you want to weigh in there on what you're telling customers about policies?
Well, so we look at what they have, and we work with an insurance agent. We have a couple agents that we work closely with, and we have them actually engage with the client and review that, because that's not our wheelhouse. We're the technology guys. So we have someone else that actually handles that for us. Gotcha.
Tyler, how are you answering that question?
Yeah, same as Jess. We refer out to the experts in the field, and again, as mentioned before, there is no strict requirement on for our clients to carry insurance from a cyber liability perspective or errors and omissions. But it's, it might be that the industry is heading that way. We do, we have changed our own contractual language to protect ourselves in other ways, as was mentioned by Jerry. But yeah, as of right now, we leave the requirement out, and then we also defer to the experts in negotiating that.
John, how about as the insurance guy, what are you advising clients there?
So, I'm sorry, on my end here?
Yeah,
okay.
On your end.
Yeah, it ultimately, it just depends on the organization, right? So some organizations, I'm going to say broadly speaking, if a company is using an MSP, they're probably large enough they need to use a standalone cyber policy. Like little $50,000 endorsements on a general liability policy somewhere, probably not going to be the best bet in terms of coverage. And I just kind of wanted to add kind of a different element to this on why I think MSPs should contractually require cyber insurance. So it's not only good for the client, it's also good for the MSP, obviously. But part of that actually has to do with the various statutes and laws that are in place and what an insurance policy says an MSP can do or not do, right? So my general recommendation is when a client has a cyber event, you can identify the threat, contain the threat, and then refrain. Because from there, now you're saying, okay, you could be getting into giving de facto legal advice, or let's say you're going to be the hero and you're like, hey, this is why you purchase backups. Well, unless a forensic analysis was done, how do you know there's not an attack loop or exfiltration of data? And at the end of the day, I understand the MSP is trying to be a good person, but that's where the MSP needs to ultimately say, hey, this is where our expertise ends. This is where you need to go out and get the attorney in the forensics. Paying a deductible versus paying that out of pocket is going to make it much more palatable, lower the probability of a lawsuit against the MSP proper. And from there, the MSP doesn't get into a position where they may be providing like a de facto risk of harm analysis where some enterprising attorney is going to come back and just put the screws on them on the witness stand, which I would hopefully none of the people here will ever be in that position.
No, those enterprising attorneys. Well, John, I think of the last question I've got here, I think I'm getting through most of them. Are you seeing any indication that purchasing threat assessment and protection packages end up resulting in lower cyber or tech E&O costs? Like, our insurance offering consideration on that investment?
They are. I'll say broadly, 90% of cybersecurity solutions out there are going to be more expensive than what you're going to save on a premium, at least initially, right? At least before an event has occurred. After an event has occurred, that may actually be mandatory, depending upon the size and sophistication of the organization. So I'd say regardless, even though it may not save you on the insurance policy, it's still a really good idea and something that I think really every business should consider.
Gotcha. We're running out of time here, so we didn't get to your question on air. We apologize for that, and we promise that we'll make sure to follow up after this event. Pat, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave, and thank you to all of our panelists today: Jess Coburn, Tyler Rasmussen, Jerry Koutavas, Joseph Brunsman, and James Slavey, as well to Topher, Tebow, and Collin Apodac for their demos. And Hyla and Misha in the background for all your help moving the questions around, making sure we're up to date on everything. Before I do let you go, I want to put up a quick private poll. Let us know if you'd like Acronis to reach out to you in the days following the event. We won't bother you. We just want to see if you want to hear from us. And we'd be happy to arrange more conversations, do a deeper dive in the demo, or have a conversation with one of our experts about how you can leverage our cyber protection solutions. We also have a few complimentary resources for you that are fully available to you, so feel free to check these out. And then there's the poll that popped up there, so feel free to answer the question there. We'll leave that up for about 20 seconds or so, and then it'll pop out. And obviously, we're here to help. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Last and certainly not least, we do want to point out we're trying to leave the world in a better place after we're all turning to dust and long gone. So we have an initiative around Cyber Foundation. If you were fortunate enough to join early, you saw some videos about how this foundation is directly impacting the lives of many children around the world. So if you're able to, please consider donating to Acronis Cyber Foundation. A little bit of money goes a very, very, very long way towards building schools and developing computer classes for some less fortunate people, and trying to leave the world in a better place here. So we appreciate all you guys joining today. Thanks so much for the active contributions in the chat area. I think we got to most questions. If we didn't get to them, we'll try to answer them after the fact. The session was recorded as well, so we can share that recording if you want to go back through and brush up on any of the tips that were provided by our excellent panelists today. So that's it. We'll wrap up here, and thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.